Today we're going to talk about boxes. We've got several out here on display. We can look at a few different designs and talk about those. Some of the techniques that we'll learn will apply to all of these boxes. We're going to start with a box today, a tower-shaped box out of maple, and learn how to get a nice fit on the lid. This one's quite nice. I can feel the air move between it, or as I pull the lid on or off. I can spin the lid fairly freely, but I can also pick the box up by the lid and not have the bottom come off of there. This is a little piece of apricot with some chatter work done on the inside or on the top of the box. That's done with a chatter tool. A little bit more advanced on there. Again, a nice fit, cylindrical box. This is a piece of olive ash or white ash. Nice pop fit. The base is very similar to the tower box that we're going to do today. The lid is a little bit different and has a different shape on the outside. Again, I do have a nice grain match on this piece. This piece is a little bit different in the fact that the lid fits inside of the base rather than over the base like the other ones. And then the lid is also a top. This is Clairol walnut. And my grandkids love to play with that box. This box is special to me. It was done by a friend of mine, Ray Key, the last time he was here teaching a class. It's a demo piece. It's unfinished. It's off the tool with Ray's work. And it's Messer birch. Very nice little piece. The tools and techniques we'll use today, we're going to go back to our spindle tools, our spindle roughing gouge, our spindle gouges. We'll also use our box scraper. We're going to learn end grain hollowing, cleaning up the insides on the box, using a scraper. We'll get more in depth to the use of the scrapers today. We're going to learn jam chucks or continue learning our jam chucks. We've started some of that. One of the things that's very intriguing about a box is a very nice box, has a nice fit, feels good in the hand. There's only a few ways to get there. There's about 12 to 15,000 ways to mess it up. So one of the most important things that we'll learn today is sequencing. If you follow the sequence that we're turning today and doing this today, you should come out with a good box. If you don't follow the sequencing, it's very difficult to get the box right. The box we're going to turn today will be out of maple. I've got a piece of 3 by 3 by 5.5 inch block of wood. This is nice and dry. It's been kiln dried and it is stable. You want to get it to your climate. Now, the first thing we're going to do, mark out centers. Here I'm just using my fingers as a scribe and my marker. It's a lot easier to find the center of that square than that square. So I've shown you 3 different ways so far to line out centers on a piece. One using a centering head, one using a ruler, and one just using your fingers. Next, I'm going to punch my centers with my spring-loaded center punch, or your awl, whatever you've got. I'm going to use my multi-tooth drive center and my cup center and my tailstock. So I've got my rest set at standard tool rest height for my spindle roughing gouge. Speed, turn the piece by hand first, start at a minimum, starting forward. Won't cut very good in reverse. Bring it up. I've got a 3-inch diameter piece. If I go back to that formula, diameter times the RPM of the lathe should equal between 6,000 and 9,000. I've got a maximum RPM on this lathe of about 3,000 RPMs. So I should be able to turn almost up to maximum speed here. I'm going to rough out, it's about 1,900 RPMs. That feels smooth. I've got my feet positioned pretty parallel to the machine itself. I've got my tool rest parallel with the lathe bed. I confirm that by looking down past the rest at my lathe bed. I want to cut a cylinder here. My feet are about shoulder width apart. My toes are tipped in just a little bit in the direction I want the tool to go. Handles down in my side, anchor, bevel, cut. Large diameter to small diameter. We're back to spindle work. The bowls we were cutting from small to large. As I came back across there, I kept my bevel in contact, and it removes wood, and then I can just start right back in by picking up a little bit more depth. Still got a little flat spot on there. Using the back of the tool, you can hear that bounce. I've still got a little bit of flat. And another thing I'm doing here is I'm watching my cut, and I'm trying to, I want to see if it's cutting clean, if this piece of wood is cutting clean. This little bit that I've left off, or I haven't cut, it's hard to start out in the middle of the space. So I'll come in and pick up the cut from the body of the box. And go out into space. Still got a little flat on there. I'm going to bring the rest in. I'm looking at the surface here. This appears to be cutting clean, which is good. I don't have to throw a lot of extra tricks in there. Getting a little lifted fiber on this side. So I'm going to mark that with my pencil so that I can reference back to that as I tried to put, rather than just the peel cut as I'm removing wood, let's try and put a little bit of shear, a little bit more shear to that tool. All right, let's check and see if that cut ran any better. There's my pencil line. It is cutting cleaner right there once it gets under the surface. So I'm not going to have to put a lot of special tool technique into getting this piece squared up or cut clean. That's always good. Just bring that a little smaller in diameter. I'm on that back wing, turned upside down. Look at those shavings coming off. Those are really nice little curls. Okay. Close enough. I'm probably close enough, but I'm going to diameter to get underneath that. It'll turn away, but I'm going to make sure that it's gone before I continue. I don't want to end up having that show up in the end piece, and then I've got to figure out what to do with it. So we'll make sure that that wood we're cut underneath that surface. That color seems to be running a little bit deeper than I expected. That oxidized color. I just don't want it in my blank. All right. That's cut clean. Now our next step is to take our skew and put a tenon on each end. Size this for your chuck. Mine's going to be about 2 to 2 1/4. I want a slight undercut. Just like we have on all of those, so I've got my nice dovetail. The undercut, that'll hold very well in my chuck. Last little bit, give that just a flip. I want to take a look at my blank. Is there anything that is pronounced on here that says I need to have one side up versus another side? I actually like the way the light hits the grain a little bit better on this piece if this is the top. I'm going to put the top into the chuck. Secure it. I'm going to switch to my shorter rest now, which you can see will fit back in much better. I'm going to kind of lay this out a little bit so that you've got an idea of which direction I'm going, what I'm doing. I'm going to part with a narrow parting tool this section here. That's down 1 1/8 inches, 1 1/4 inches. I'm going to have a tenon right there that's about 3/8 of an inch long. And then my overall length will be down in here somewhere. So I've got the top, the part, tenon, the body, and a little bit of wood or a jam chuck. Now, if I'm dealing with a very pretty piece of wood, or extremely pretty piece of wood, extremely rare, exotic, I'll jam chuck off of anything that's available. I don't have to have a piece of wood out of that box to jam chuck it. And this may not be long enough. We'll see when we get there if that's going to work. For parting, I'm going to stay at that same rough out speed, about 1900, 2000 RPMs. I've now got my narrow parting tool here, and this has been sharpened across the top and the bottom. Come in, go about 1/4 inch deep, and then take up, go down the blank about half the width of the tool. And go about 1/4 inch deeper. And then just step that down through. I can close one eye and look down through there, and I can see that I'm about 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch in diameter. Once you're more comfortable at the lathe and with the parting tool, you can part through all the way through this piece. The way I do that is my elbow comes up and rests on top of the headstock. My left hand gently supports the piece, and then with my right hand, I pick up the part or the cut and drive right to center. It will usually just stop spinning in my hand. It doesn't want to flip and fly all over, as long as you part off good and solid and consistent through there. If you take your time and let it start to flop around, then it'll bounce around a bit. And if you don't catch it, usually the ground will break its fall. Since this is one of our first pieces that we're parting off, remember also never have your tailstock in position when you're parting things off. Because when you part that all the way through, you've got a little bit of pressure from that tailstock, and you compress that wood or press the blank in, and you've only got support on one side, and that support's coming from your parting tool, so that's an instant catch. It's going to want to grab that and bind that up. So always move your tailstock out of the way. I've got a little back saw. Doesn't take long at all. There's not a lot of wood left in there. Set that to the side. I'm going to bring my tool rest in. Set that up. I don't need my tailstock for this project, and I certainly don't want to poke my elbow into that. Revolving center. I'm going to face this surface off. Now, if you remember on the platter, my second cut was a finished surface. This is my first finished surface here. This will be the inside, the rim on the box when this is done. So I want this cut clean. Make a nice entry. Come in and cut across there. Now I'm going to change direction here a little bit. I'm going to show you how the scraper works before you have to get down into a hole and use the scraper. I'll work on this center bit here. Well, I've stopped this. This is cut clean, so I'm good on that there for my box when I'm ready to continue on. We'll move that rest back a little bit so we'll actually pretend like we're in the bottom of the box, like we will be later on. We're going to use our box scraper. Now, this box scraper, this is the Artisan box scraper. The side is not ground all the way to the edge, and that's intentional. I don't want this edge cutting, and I do want to know where it's in. I want to be able to point that so I know where the tip is, because my tip is in line with all the blade. Once you grind down the center, then you lose the reference point for that tip. Then I've got an angle of 89 degrees or less, and then it radiuses back. I'm going to have my hand up front on the tool and my elbow over the top of the handle. I want my handle higher than the cutting edge when I'm at center. So I need to pick my rest up just a little bit more. If you've got the handle down low and this tool bites, it digs in before it can release and becomes a very violent catch. If you're above that 90-degree break, then this tool is very unlikely to catch. The hardest part to hollow is the dead center because it's not turning, but we're going to come in and I'll just get a little step, step, step. This is just like I would do if I was down inside the bottom of the box. Only now I can see that surface. Once I've got my side cut down and I'm flat or relatively flat on the bottom, then I'm going to kick the handle towards center. And see where that cut's picking up now? More in the center of that blade on that radius, and then glide that radius across. Now, scraper works here because it's all end grain. It's an even grain surface. And you can look at that. That is just as clean as can be. 600 grit paper would rough that surface up, not make it finer. So with that, let's go ahead and hollow this piece out. We're going to do the bulk removal with our 3/8 spindle gouge. If you remember on our egg jam chuck when we hollowed out the grain there, I started just behind and below center. And then plunged that in, and then it was able to come and open up. It's almost self-feeding. Now on that last cut, I started in and it started to develop a cone. Okay, I was not quite on center, and so I came back, picked up the cut at center before I continued over. You don't want to leave a cone in there. I can go just a little deeper. Now I'm going to go back to my scraper. I'm going to come in, level off that bottom, just like we did on the practice session there. Now this cut is one of the most important cuts that I'll make on the box, at least as according to getting a good fit. I need to have a nice parallel cylinder going up into this box. I've left myself a lot of wall thickness here because of the tower shape. I'm going to take wood away from the outside on this, so I've kept that in mind. Once, as I put my tool up onto the rest, I look down past the blade and I'm lining it up with the bedway. That's why I cleared the shavings off of the bedway. Handle elevated so that I don't have a catch. Come in, hold that, and then plunge straight back. If your rest is low, and you don't have clearance ground here in your blade, the wood will come in and touch that area and push you to a cone shape or a tapered shape, getting tighter at the back. One of a box turner's best friends is a brand new unsharpened pencil. I can hold that inside the lid of the box at 9 o'clock and then look straight down over the top and eyeball that with the bed lathe, and that's going to exaggerate any taper that I've got in here. To me, that looks really good. That's a cylindrical box top. I can be a little gap this way, a little bit wider at the top than the bottom, but I definitely don't want any of this. It is well worth taking a few extra minutes and making certain that you've got the right fit on this lid. I've got just a little torn grain right in the top of that box. I'm going to rub a little scratch free into that. One of the few tools I hone is my scrapers. I'm going to use the 180 grit side of my diamond card here and take any existing burr off that I've got and then lightly hone the face of the tool. Don't run your thumb over the top of that. You'll remove any existing burr that you just put on. I'm going to come back in. Rest seems a little bit high. I'm going to put the tip of the tool back into the corner. I don't want to go down that side wall. I know I'm happy there. And then just drift that towards center. Back out. I'm not watching what the tool's doing, I'm watching the surface that's being left behind. So I'm watching over here at the 4 to 5 o'clock range. One of the problems, or the big problem with trying to watch what the tool's doing, is you stick your head in there, that pushes the handle down, the tip up into the blank, then the blank grabs the tool, picks the tool back up where it should be before it can release that. Your head and the tool handle are occupying the same bit in the same point in space. Your head loses that battle. So watch the surface over here at the far side rather than what the tip of the tool is doing. I'm feeling what the tool's doing and watching what it did. All right, so I've got the surface cleaned up on that. Move my tool rest out. On the inside of a box, when we talk about a finish for the inside of a box, one, they don't get handled a lot. So I don't need a super high durable finish on the inside of a box. So a wax works good. I don't want anything that has a heavy petrochemical smell to it. If you take the lid off of your finish and it stinks, you don't want to take the lid off your box and have it stink. If I use lacquers, oil varnishes or that on the inside, those scents will stay around for a long, long time. So scratch free is what I'm using. It has no scent. The other option that I would use or consider would be something like a Versa Wax with a lemon scent. Something that smells nice and pleasant. I do have a little nub right there in the bottom. Now to get that nub out of there, my left hand goes onto the tool rest. Thumb goes on top of the tool, index finger comes up underneath the bottom of the tool, handle kicks over so that only the center of the blade comes underneath that nub, and I'm above, the nub is above the tool. I come in, touch the wood, pinch my thumb and my index finger together with the blade in there and drop the handle, and that takes the nub out of there. If I come in and sweep sideways, I'll put a new nub in there. And you can sit and trace that all day, or you can sit and chase that all day long. I'm now done with the lid of the box on the inside, so it's ready to take out of the chuck and get replaced with the body of the box. Make certain that you're secure in your chuck. My next step is to size to my rough fit on my tenon. And so to do that, bring my blank up to speed, 2,000 RPMs or so. I'm not pushing the RPMs. I'm going to my straight across skew. This one happens to be in a square section. I like it a lot for cutting in my box tenons because it is very stable. I'd cut down a ways and then cut a taper. Check to see if that fits. I'm nowhere near fitting on that taper. So I'm going to remove the taper, cut a new taper. That's very close. I'm going to remove most of the taper and then put a very shallow taper in this time. I've got a little burnish line right there. That's where the fit of this piece is right now. That's where, if I cut that to a cylinder, these two parts would match and fit. I now know how far I can hollow out to. I'm going to square that up again and then put a shallow taper. Bring the lid up. Don't hold that too long. I don't want to burn a ring here, but I want a burnish mark on the wood. And I can see that burnish mark in there. That tells me where this lid is going to fit onto this box if I was to cut that tenon out right now. Before I cut the tenon and I fit the lid to the box, I'm going to come back and hollow this out. A lot of turners will fit the lid, turn the outside, and then hollow the box. And as soon as you do that, you change the fit of the lid. And most often they go very loose, more so than they go tight, and they almost never hold where you want them to be. We're going to keep that control on adjusting the fit all the way through this piece. So we'll set this to the side, set our tool to the side. I'm going to go back to my 3/8 spindle gouge. I'm going to bring my rest around to the face. I want to be just slightly below standard tool rest height. Speed, I'm going to keep right in that 2,000 RPM range. It's working good for us. I'm not getting any vibration. First thing I want to do is remove that torn grain from the parting tool. That is a finished surface. Found my anchor, bevel, picked up my cut. Once I had a place for my bevel, the handle dropped and the cut arced towards center. As I got closer to the center, the handle comes up. It's a good idea to stop and verify that that surface right there is cut clean. There's my center. There's where I want my tip to enter, at about 430. Just behind and below. Push it to center. Now find the center and I come up off the rest. Getting a little bounce. I'm not quite perfect on that. Open it up, get rid of the bounce. My handle running right down the center axis of the lathe. This is a bit harder wood than the aspen. I'm going to put my thumb on my blade as a depth gauge. And I've just eyeballed where I want to be for overall depth based off my rough line, and I've drilled that deep in there now. Since this is a harder wood, this tool might be very hot. Be careful, don't grab hold of it and start hollowing and burn yourself. Then from working from the center out, that annoying sound is the tool letting me know it's being abused. So it's time to switch over and go over to the scraper. This is where the practice that we did on the lid by being way over the tool rest comes into play. I'm going to keep my rest up closer. Now, one of the things I need to watch for here is that I don't push this into a tight hole and it starts to lift on the back side. When that happens, it flips your tool around, and that's where these old divots get picked up in the side of your tool. It's spinning. It's a nice, spectacular catch. So if I feel that starting to lift, I'll back out and open up that path, make it a little wider. Didn't want to drift that sideways. I'm trying to go straight back on there. I can still feel I've got drilled hole at the bottom. Once I hit the end of that drilled hole, my scraper won't want to go forward any further. Still can see there's a hole in the bottom of this, and I've got some shavings I want to get out of there. So I've got a poor man's compressor. If you use a straight straw, it kind of gets back in your eyes, or if you don't use a straw. So I need a little bit more depth. Back to center. Okay, just about all the way through to center. I've got just a pinpoint of from where the tip of the gouge drilled. I can see just that little dot in there, and I can feel that it's got just a little crown to it. I'm going to come in, find the side of this, and I'm going to go in about an inch or so going straight down. And then I'm going to kick the handle over, and I'm going to aim for this depth, but inside of that wall about 1/4 of an inch. And so my hole's getting bigger as it gets deeper. And that's one reason why I don't grind the side of this tool. I want to be able to see and envision where that tip is. Don't put your fingers into a running piece. And for that matter, don't put anything into a running piece that you want to hold on to. It's not good practice. And when you get deep in a box like this and you stick your fingers in there and it's running, it kind of cauterizes the skin and the web of your fingers. And doesn't feel real good, so I've been told. Gently clean the bottom up on that. Not real happy with what I did, where that tool went sideways on me a little bit. I'm going to bring that back. I want to get that thickness back on there. By going straight that first 1.25 inches or so, I've left myself an escape route so that I can shorten that tenon up if I missed the fit. And that was a little bit of a miss. What I've got going on here is I'm trying to equal this wall thickness here, so I'm following the outside shape on that. So I've got a lot of sweep on the outside. I will have a lot of sweep on the outside of this box, but I've got a lot of curve on the inside. I've got the straight wall to start with. That'll give me something that if I need to jam fit it to adjust the chuck, I can. Or if I miss the fit, I could come down a little bit further and still continue on and get a good fit. If I started this taper all the way up here, you imagine that line coming through there, I've thinned that tenon out. If I need to slide down the wall to make the fit, I won't have that. If I leave this with a cylinder on the inside or just a cup in the bottom of it, it leaves a very heavy box. And people are more pleasantly surprised when it weighs less than they think it should rather than when it's heavier than it should. At this point, I'm going to sand and finish the inside. I want to do it exactly like I did the lid, so they look the same. On the lid, I cut clean and didn't need to sand. I've got one little groove down in the bottom. We'll deal with it later. Well, we won't deal with it later. We'll call it good for today on there. Nothing's more boring than watching somebody bore on the inside of a piece. You can't see what's going on in there. So again, a little scratch free. Got to stick my finger down in there, so I've turned the speed down just so I don't burn my finger. You could use a set of sanding clamps to get down in these deeper boxes like this. Okay, we're back out to the outside. Going to set my tool rest up, standard tool rest height, and I'm going back to my straight edge skew. My lid doesn't quite fit anymore. One, I took a little bit of material back on there, but also this piece has had a few minutes to relax. Once you get that hollowed out, it's a good idea to give it just a few minutes rest. at least a few minutes rest, 2 overnight, to let this wood relax. And if you've sanded heavy in there, you've generated quite a bit of heat. You want to wait until it gets back to room temperature, and that's all cooled. Back up to speed, 2,000 RPM. Take a few peeling cuts. For that tenon. I'm working on the last 1/16 of an inch or so of wood, and check that fit. And this time I'm brushing my dust off of my tool after each cut. I want to be able to see how much wood I'm removing. So I've cut a little taper. I'm fitting over that taper there. Dust comes off. Crunch fit. It's a little tight, but it tells me where I can start working to. Gonna lengthen that out. Okay, that cut came down to where I want the thickness of the outside to be. So I projected that line down there. And then I'm going to continue to refine the fit here. Now I'm trying to get a cylinder. And so I've got a good cylinder on the lid. Get a cylinder here. That ought to fit together quite nice. Before I fit that, get out my depth gauge. My overall depth ended up just past that line there. I want about 3/8 of an inch. There's about where I'm going to part. There's my depth there. So I'll take this tenon off of that. That'll work out good. I like to line my grain up here. I don't know that it matters. Bit crunchy. I can see a little burnish line down there about halfway. If I use sandpaper here, I wouldn't have any control. I wouldn't know how much material I've removed. So I never use sandpaper there. It's always off the tool. So my inside of my box is right there to give you an idea. To right there, I'm going to come in first thing with my narrow parting tool. Part in about 1/4 inch. I now know where the bottom of my box is going to be. Now this is a tower shaped box, so the top of the box is a smaller diameter than the bottom of the box. So that's the first cut I'm going to make on the outside. Spindle roughing gouge, anchor, bevel, cut. Using the wing or the nose of the tool when I'm cutting a cove. I don't cut uphill, so I need to come back the other direction. Now I know how deep I can go because I cut that groove as my depth gauge. Take a little bit of extra time, get your shape right. I'm looking for nice asymmetrical cove. I've now got down to my thickness. Bring my rest around. Go to my 3/8 3/8 spindle gouge. Put a little OG on top. Get my tool started. Cove, 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 bead. One more time. And that cove's not dishing in, it's coming straight and cutting cove out that way. Get my tool started. cove, 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 bead, slow down at the end, cut all the way to the center. This corner is very sharp. And those fibers are really short on that edge, so I'm going to just put a little chamfer here. I want to have some kind of separation between the top and the bottom. So I'll slide my lid off just a little bit. Now that can be as simple as the groove that we had in there for getting down to the depth. I could do something. The one that I had in there was pretty wide. I could do just a small 1/16 of an inch groove. And what I'm looking for is something that when the fingers feel it, and they send the signal to the brain, said, hey, there's something going on there. It doesn't match. The eyes look down and say, yep, fingers, you're right. There's a groove there, or there's a bead there. But there is something that separates that. Now, I don't care where you live. Your wood's going to have some movement with the seasons. And so while this may have fit perfectly smooth just a minute ago while I had that lid on there, and possibly even if I turn the grain around, because it's all turned as a cylinder today, but that lid is going to move slightly different than that body. And so I always want some kind of separation between the two. So like I say, it could be as simple as a little groove with your parting tool or your skew on the side. Let's roll a bead, anchor. My wrist is in, anchor to the rest. My wrist is in an uncomfortable position, and I'm going to roll from my left to my right. Find my bevel. And roll that out. Switch my wrist position, anchor, bevel, bring that around. Now the reason I've got the lid slid off just a little bit is there's no way I'll get that match on that groove if I've got the lid tight. I'll always be off a little bit. Now I can tighten the lid on to the piece, come in, half a bead, and half a bead, and dress that up quite well, nicely on there. Reduce my speed half or a little bit more, and I'm ready to start sanding. Sheet paper, fold it in thirds just like we did before. In fact, this is the same bit of abrasives. Starting with 120 grit, you can see it doesn't take long with 120 grit to level that surface up. $180. Look everything over. We're ready to apply a finish on this. We'll go with a little scratch free first, just to polish it out. That pops that grain out quite nice. Now I've buffed out that scratch free. Let's put a friction polish on this. I'm going to use a shellac based product. This is a waxed shellac. And the wax gives you lubricant. There's a lot of friction polishes on the market. I like to have the ones with the least amount of wax rather than a lot of wax. Some of them are almost all wax. Wax goes on easy, it also comes off easy. I want enough wax to act as a lubricant while this is turning, but I don't want so much wax that it builds. I'm working a small area at a time, and then I'm going to use friction from speed and a little pressure in order to cure and dry out the solvent, which is alcohol. As I dry off the first coat, which is rubbed in by hand always, then I'm applying a drop or two to the towel at a time. Keep your hand moving side to side very quick, or you'll get streaks build up in this type of a finish. Build as many coats as you'd like until you're happy with the finish. The reason you rub the first coat in is so that it penetrates into the cells of the wood a little bit. And if you've got dust in an open grain wood, and you apply a friction polish onto an open grain wood while it's turning, you might see the dust particles left in the pores of the wood. Friction polishes can be very durable if you've applied them properly. Most people don't apply them properly. They either flood too much on, leave a soft spot, a soft coat underneath a hardened coat, then they sponge, they lose their gloss and their sheen to them. And just like any other finish, they can be taken care of, or they need to be taken care of. You can restore a shellac fairly easy. Our next step is going to be remove the lid and adjust the fit on the lid to where it is where I like it. That's a tight fit, it's a two-handed fit. That's my work fit. I needed it or wanted it that tight so that I could do all this work out here on the lid and shape it. Now that I've got all my work done, now I'll adjust this for the final fit for the end user. So I'm going to adjust the fit, bring my speed back up. (1900, 2000 RPM). I'm going to my straight across skew that's in a square section tool. This was originally purchased as a beading and parting tool, which is ground square across, and I've just put a skew angle on it. That makes it a lot easier to work here because the handle's off to the side and that gets my eye in a line a little bit better with what I'm trying to accomplish. I've moved my tool rest slightly so that I can get my finger wrapped up underneath there and get a good hold here. Now I'm going to cut a barrel shape tenon. So I taper that slightly on the front, brush the dust off, taper back to the center slightly, and I've got one shiny bit there, and I'm just going to kiss that and then check the fit. That's still tight. You might be able to see where that's a little shiny right there at that high point. Brush the dust off my tool. Just skim this. I'd rather check it 10 times and get to the right fit than go too much and not have checked it. Give that a little twist. I can see the burnish. Now, not everybody wants a pop fit like that. It's really nice if you want to take that to the club meeting and show off everybody that you got a pop fit, but that's still just a little tight. It's going to take 2 hands to pull that apart. You don't always want that in a box. Sometimes you want to have a box that just the lid comes off with 1 hand, especially if you've got a little jewelry box that's by the sink for rings or something like that. That's not a 2-handed box. Or if you're giving it to your aunt, your grandmother's got arthritis in her hand so bad she can't pull that lid off, they're not going to be happy with a really tight fit on that box lid. I like to feel air movement on mine, but I don't want them to where I've got to pry them apart. They're difficult to pry apart. Again, sandpaper. I'd have no idea what I'm doing shape-wise or how much material I'm removing, so I'd lose a lot of control by using sandpaper, and so I wouldn't allow that. That's a much nicer fit. Doesn't have that loud pop on it, but it turns and it's fine. Now, this may, and most likely, will change a little bit as it rests overnight. It might be a little bit tighter tomorrow, in which case I might have to come back through and retouch that tenon a little bit. For now, I'm going to put a little scratch free on there. On that tenon, just so that it looks the same as everything else, has a finish on it. And I'm ready to part this off. One quick check on the depth of my hole. I've got plenty of wood on the bottom. You're never happy when you get this far, go to part this off and it comes off all of a sudden, you've got a big hole in the bottom of your box. Speed 1900. Just stepping one side, then the other, 1/4 inch deep at a time. Down to about 1 inch in diameter. 1/2 inch in diameter. Stop and take the sod of that if you would like. I'm going to reach over the top. My arm's supported by the headstock. I'm supporting the box with my, and I've got one finger inside, and I just aim for center and part that off. I've got a choice now. Do I turn this down for a jam chuck to fit inside of the box and hold it, which would be what I would do if I needed to adjust the fit on this tenon? Or do I go ahead and cut a relief and size to that and jam the box into the jam block that I've got here? One, I've never seen a box split from jamming it into a compression chuck like that. I have seen many boxes split by jamming the jam chuck into the box. That's thin material now, you've got to be careful. So let's take the safe bet, hollow this out, and open it up. It's a little bit more difficult, but it's a great skill builder. My RPMs stay the same, 2,000 RPMs, 1900, 2,000 RPMs. I'm going to bring my tool rest in front. Standard tool rest height for my 3/8 spindle gouge. Just like we did earlier, I'm going to face this surface off. Mark center, and I've marked where my tool is going to enter so you can see that. Open it up a little bit, check your fit. I'm not there yet, so I can square this up. There's the other side of our blank. Cut a new taper. That's close. I'm going to square this up. Cut a shallow taper. You can see with the pencil on there the taper that I've got. I've got a pretty good taper on there, and I'm just barely catching the inside of that. Just like we did on our jam chuck for our bowl, I'm going to bring this skew in from the side. Get a little bit more taper on that. I've opened it up to where I'm hoping that my tenon fits in just a little bit. And I can get a burnish on there for the fit. I've got a rather long bevel, so I'm sliding that back. And I've picked it up above center so that I'm clear of the wood coming around. Okay, that's close. And I'm not deep enough. The reason I'm not just using my box scraper and going straight back through is just like on the bowl jam chuck. For every 1/16 of an inch I take off of here, I take a 1/16 inch off of there, and I just don't have that kind of control that I do when I come in and sneak up on it like this. So I'm coming in very careful. I do have a barrel shape tenon here, and so I'm fitting at different points, but I want to fit at the widest point. I'm sneaking up on this. And if you don't have enough wood left in the bottom of your blank, don't worry about that. To cut a jam chuck, you need a little bit more angle on the skew. If you don't have enough wood to cut your jam chuck, just get a scrap piece. My tool rest back and front, standard tool rest height, 3/8 spindle gouge. Should be running true. If not, you're not shouldered up here. You're not fit in that jam chuck right. Face this surface off here. Watch that entry cut so you don't have a skid. I'm coming in about 1/4 of an inch and stopping. I had about 3/8 of an inch to work with, so I'm not worried about going through the bottom on this one. Famous last words. Now, as I come up to the wall on this cut, I just kind of roll the tip over and smooth that up. I've created a little half bead on this, on the bottom of this box. That'll lift it up off the table and make it look better. Now if I want a whole bead, I'm going to pick up my bevel, angle in towards the center, Again, wait until that cuts that nub off of there. Don't try and push and break it off. That's all right if I wanted the half bead. For the full bead, I'm now going to come back from the center out to the other side of the bead. Cutting straight across. As I get to the end of that, where I want my bead and the thickness that I want it, lift the handle, close the flute, scrape on the bottom wing. And don't drag the tip in like I just did. You can scrape back the other way if you want. I'm going to clean that up just a little bit, give it a little bit more definition. This area here, if you're not real happy with the smoothness on it, come in with your skew laid down flat, sharp edge. It's a negative rake scraper. That'll also clean up the corners on that bead quite nicely. Here on the corner of this, I've got fibers coming this way and ending, and I've got really short fibers. I've got a chamfer on the lid, so a chamfer on the base would look like it belongs there. Move my banjo out of the way, reduce my speed. Find my abrasives. .120. Just like power sanding, I'm going to start with a coarser grit than I think I need. Move through the grits very quick. Or a lot quicker than if I had started at 220. .180. 240. 320. 320. Scratch free to polish. If you look, you can see where this has started to settle. Always shake up your friction polishes before you use them. If you wanted to put lines back there to sign your name, you can do that before you put a finish or afterwards, and then just finish up the grooves. Speed's 1100 as I bumped it up to get a little bit more heat going on the finish, a little friction. So I'll kind of blend the two surfaces together. Be careful with any rag that has a finish on it. If you put them all in a pile, they can spontaneously combust. I like to unfold my finish rags, hang them over the side of my waste bin so that they dry like that rather than bundled up in a ball of towels that can spontaneously combust. Hold on to the two sides of your box, and then with one hand, give that box just a little pop with the other. Put the lid on there. Check for the grain lineup. I've got a nice little grain match all the way around. That bead helps hide the fact that it's not perfect, but it's not going to be perfect because I've got the tenon in there. So unless your grain is perfectly straight, it won't be dead perfect. And then when that sits on a tabletop with that bead on it and that chamfer underneath it, that lifts it up above the tabletop, and it almost appears that it's hovering on there rather than sitting on the table.